For several years, my daughter shared the experience with my mother of witnessing her mother hold a knife to my throat and with great rage in her eyes threaten to kill me. And for a long time, I didn't remember that particular event. I very much remember the evening though. And I remember the heatedness of it, and I remember the anger, and I remember telling my daughter to go get in the car. And I took her to a friend's house, and I called my mother, who was in Texas, and asked her to please come and get Bella. Something bad is going to happen, and she doesn't need to be here for it. 2 days later, my mother arrived in Virginia from Texas, picked up my daughter, and I stood there and watched them drive away with my daughter looking out the back window, not knowing if I was ever going to see her again, and her mother not even coming out of the bathroom. 1 week later, her mother was arrested and she went to jail for a year and a half. I spent the next week or so here in Virginia, at which point I left and I joined my mother and my daughter in Texas. That was in April of 2016, and it was methamphetamine, and it was the culmination of a very long battle with opiates and painkillers and illicit drugs. 2016, I was first introduced to pain pills and narcotics in, I guess, maybe 1996. And in 1999, I was introduced to OxyContin. And I got swept up in Purdue Pharma's OxyContin epidemic that absolutely ravaged this area of the country that I live in. Welcome to Above the Noise. My name is Casey Messick, and I am a recovering addict. I am your host, and this is Above the Noise, a live podcast where we seek to elevate the conversation above the sound bites, above the fear tactics and the division tactics that social media and mainstream media want to just keep us mired in and keep us wrapped up in the noise and so distracted that we can't focus on ourselves, we can't focus on each other, we can't focus on our passions, our dreams, and our lives. Tonight's episode is the daunting detours of addiction and the road to recovery, and it is my personal story through the OxyContin epidemic in what is arguably ground zero for that OxyContin epidemic that exploded in the late 90s into the early 2000s, and just we all kind of know where that went. And so, like I said, that story that I just shared with you, there was methamphetamine, and it was the culmination. It was about a month, maybe two, that was just completely out of control, and that was in 2016, April of 2016, and I have not touched any illicit drugs or dope or narcotics or pain pills or anything like that since. So, that puts me a little over 7 years now. So, bravo to me for that and everybody else that is doing that. So, before I get too deep into my personal story, I kind of because I became swept up in an epidemic that absolutely destroyed my life and destroyed the lives and affected the lives, I dare say, of almost every family in the United States, easily as that epidemic just made its way across the country. So to get started, I got introduced to OxyContin in probably 1999. So like I said, prior to that, I was introduced to some stuff. I was at that experimental kind of age, you know what I mean? And I lived in a part of the country. I live in Southwest Virginia. I live there now, and I lived there when this addiction and all this started. And so I live in an area, the county is called Lee County, Virginia. At the time that the OxyContin epidemic exploded, it still remains the largest county in the state of Virginia. At the time, in the late 90s, early 2000s, is the poorest county in the state of Virginia. It is still the largest land-wise, but it is now the second poorest county in the state of Virginia. So before I get into that, so I was introduced to pain pills because this area is coal mining country. It's tobacco farming. It's hard labor work, and so prescription pain medication was already a thing here. It was already being prescribed. It was because there's a lot of poverty here. It was also the underground economy, and at the time that I moved here, it was very much things like Xanaxes, Klonopins, Valiums, honestly, at the time. And so it created a perfect environment for Purdue Pharma to market OxyContin. And so in December of 2019, Stat News released an article titled, "In a newly unsealed 1996 email, Dr. Richard Sackler wrote that he wanted Purdue Pharma to be feared as a tiger with claws, teeth, and balls." And so to illustrate what so many of us got wrapped up in, I'm going to read through this real quick. And then and when I get to 1999, I will jump into my story. But we need to understand or it maybe be reminded of the concerted effort of Purdue Pharma to get this medication, OxyContin, prescribed to absolutely everybody that they possibly could. So it says, starting in the early 1990s, the internal emails and other documents describe Purdue's preparation for the opioid launch in 1996, its plan for targeting OxyContin to non-cancer patients with chronic pain, and how the company aggressively fought off threats to its blockbuster sales, even as the opioid epidemic took hold. So from June 15th, 1993 to April 15th, 1994, Purdue conducted a clinical trial in elderly patients with osteoarthritis to test the safety and efficacy of OxyContin. It enrolled 133 patients, but only 63 completed the trial. About 82% of the patients had some sort of adverse event related to the treatment. Yet Purdue concluded that the study demonstrated that controlled release oxycodone is a safe and effective analgesic for the control of osteoarthritis-related pain. December 29th, 1994, sales and marketing executive Michael Friedman, who would later become Purdue's CEO, sent a memo marked very confidential to 3 members of the Sackler family, including Richard, outlining the planned marketing strategy. Our current MS Cotton business has created a franchise with certain physicians who routinely write prescriptions for the drug, Friedman wrote. These family physicians, generally physicians and internists, may be the bridge that we can use to expand the use of OxyContin beyond cancer patients to chronic non-malignant pain, a market that he noted accounted for 68.7 million prescriptions a year. So they were targeting the largest prescription drug market possible. Purdue Pharma targeted it. So we do not want to position OxyContin in a way that will discourage physicians from using OxyContin for chronic non-malignant pain, especially when we have studies available that demonstrate efficacy and safety for this indication. March 31st, 1995, in the minutes of a marketing team meeting on the impending launch of OxyContin in the U.S., Purdue staff emphasized that the drug needs to be used for a broad group of pain patients, and that the twice daily dosing of OxyContin is its most important benefit. It was reinforced that we do not wish to niche OxyContin just for cancer pain, the minute stated. The team conducted focus groups and one-on-one interviews with more than 500 health professionals to gauge their attitudes about prescribing OxyContin. 76% of those questions would use OxyContin on opioid naive patients. So, to be clear, they were very, very focused on prescribing this. A small, not even, 75% of doctors were on board with it. So, and they knew what they were doing when they released this drug onto the market. In May 6, 1996, executives of Purdue and the Sackler's global drug company, Mundi Pharma, met with the pharmacology group at Geneva University Hospital in Switzerland in an effort to enlist an influential doctor in the group to conduct a study of OxyContin. A report on the meeting was shared with Richard Sackler. It described good cooperation with Pierre Dyer, a most important person in the Swiss medical area, a development viewed as being decisive for the future, although he did express interest. Dyer raised some concerns, according to the memo, including how low back pain is not regarded a suitable indication for opioids in Europe. This indication is accompanied by a psychological factor which holds a risk for addiction if opioids are used for treatment. Among the subjects Dyer considered important and worthy of further investigation is information about the abuse addiction potential versus other opioids because of the rapid onset of action of OxyContin. September 3rd, 1996, Richard Sackler in an email string with Purdue executives about how best to promote the successful launch of OxyContin. First-year sales goals were reached 4 months early, described his aggressive approach to expanding the drugs market, including internationally. He wrote that he wants to get an audience for our patient infringement suits so that we are feared as a tiger with claws, teeth, and balls, and build some excitement with prescribers that OxyContin tablets is the way to go. I'm reading through these emails between the Sackler family and Purdue Pharma executives in retrospect. Now, I've never read these things before, you know what I mean? And my life was fucking destroyed by that OxyContin epidemic, And so I'm not even going to finish reading them, honestly. So fast forward to 1999, when I was introduced to OxyContin, they already knew that it was an issue. So to rewind, I had started dabbling with narcotic pain pills and was introduced to them because I live in an area of the country that is coal mining, it's tobacco farming, it's hard, laborious work. And so pain medication was already heavily prescribed. And if you caught any of what I just read, this market was heavily targeted. It describes this exact type of market that they targeted, and it happened. And NIH released an article specifically talking about Purdue Pharma's commercial success, but the downside of this epidemic that it created, because it changed everything. I can remember doing before I start this story, let me preface it with saying that nothing I'm about to share about my story and my life during those times is to glorify it in any way. And sometimes I might tell it with an essence of, I don't even know what to call it. It's an appreciation of where I was to where I'm at now. And sometimes I can't help but smile if I'm recounting a story of, holy shit, that's where I came from. Like, Casey, you were in a place where you had no water and you were going to the neighbors and you were filling up 5-gallon buckets from the restaurant and bringing them to your place to flush the toilet and shower. And this has been 20 years ago now, but it was all a direct result of drug abuse and OxyContin. And drug addiction in this country is so massive, and we're talking millions and millions of people. And I did another live feed back in 2017 titled From Innocence to the Gateways of Addiction. I'm paraphrasing because I don't remember exactly. But it's how so many people find themselves at these gateways of addiction. And it's It's a coping mechanism, guys, that completely takes control of our life because we find ourselves there, a lot of people, and everything I share is based on my experience and my conversations with people, and just things I've come to learn over the years, through my course of addiction, and my struggles and my road to recovery, is that I feel like most people end up at those doorways of addiction because two primary things: childhood sexual abuse and abandonment. And I say it all the time, and I think a lot of the issues that people have stem from that, and the things that they've layered upon themselves to protect themselves. And dope and drugs and that avenue is it's just another means to deal with that. Some people shop, some people gamble, some people have sex, some people work, you know what I mean? And a lot of those are so intertwined. And when you find yourself at the doorway addiction, like like I said, when I got into it, I was young, I was 17, 18, you know what I mean? I was at the experimental age. And when Oxycontin hit, it was everywhere. Like I could remember a doctor here. I'm not going to mention his name, but I can remember he was so loosely prescribing it for everybody. If there were, you would go to his office and his parking lot would just be full of cars for like 5, 6 states away, just packed deep, And it was everywhere. It was everywhere. And it's hard for me to like roll it back and just, when you get hooked on dope, it it numbs you out, but it kind of takes you to these heights. And when you look at the science of it, and if you've watched any of the past episodes, you'll know that I've talked a lot about, in just the recent episodes, brain chemicals, and what's released based on our own thoughts, and when you're happy thoughts and you're in love, your body is releasing oxytocin, dopamine, and serotonin, and all these really good things. Well, when you find yourself wrapped up in that world of addiction, when it starts, it's this numbing feeling, and you get that rush of dopamine and serotonin and oxytocin, and it feels great. It feels great. And you drop the, you're up at these highs, and it kind of drops you down, you level out, but you do it again. But each time you drop a little below normal, and so every time you're using, you're just trying to get back to normal, but you never really get there. And then what happens is the lifestyle itself starts compounding on itself, to where, like guilt and shame sets in. And so when guilt and shame sets in, because of the way the brain chemicals work, it starts releasing its own set of brain chemicals. So it's just pushing you further and further down, away from that feeling of love and value and appreciation of self and society. And you wall yourself off, thinking that you're fooling everybody around you, but as time goes on, you're really not. And I think where people end up, it depends very much on where they started. And I think, for myself, and I'm only saying this from my own personal experience, when I met my daughter's mother, that at the top of the show I described holding a knife to my throat and threatening to kill me. We were young, and we got together young, and as we got to know each other, she shared her stories of sexual abuse, and we kind of entered into that sphere of drug use together. Um, it was very much part of the social sphere here. I mean, it just was. People were smoking weed and they were doing pain pills, Lortabs and Tylosses and Percocets. Um, but as time went on, I realized how that sexual abuse was affecting our life and the relationship. And because I was young, like I thought at the time that I could fix her because of how I had grown up, and I had a good upbringing, and I had a good mother that was attentive, and she took parenting seriously. Like I was very, very fortunate for my childhood. I feel like I have abandonment issues that I work with, that I'm working on. Um, But I feel like I got on a roller coaster ride, whether it spanned for 20 years, and that's not to blame or justify my own struggles with addiction on that, because that's not it. I think that's just how I got kind of wrapped up in it in the beginning. But like I said, then addiction just creates its own issues, and I can remember being 2 years in and getting up one morning and doing the last Percocet that I had and coughing and it just shooting down the drain and just going down the drain and like freaking out, like, oh my God, what am I gonna do? That's the last pill I had. And it was that morning that I realized, like, oh shit, like I got a problem. I think I got a problem. That was 2 years. It took me another 16 roughly to get out of it. And through the course of that, there was jail, there was thievery, there was infidelity, there was everything you can imagine that goes along in the depths of that. And all the while here in this region, Purdue Pharma was just pushing it and pushing it. And guys, it was everywhere here. I mean, it's hard to even really explain and really put into context, but I'm talking everywhere. I worked in restaurants, ate up with it. There was gas stations you would pull up and the gas station attendant would sell you the dope. And then needles made their way in, and I'm glad I survived it. A lot of people didn't. A lot of people still struggle with it. I've lost friends. I've lost friends even recently, within the last couple of months. People that I didn't, when I knew them at the time, I called them friends, but they were almost nemesis at the time. But when I heard of their death, and I can't say it's because of dope, honestly, I should put some parameters on that, but and it makes me sad to think about all the families, just like mine. Like, I deal with the ramifications of that addiction that ended in 2016 for me. And I still deal with like the aftermath of that life still 7 years later, almost every day, because part of addiction, and I think it doesn't maybe get talked about enough, and maybe I should have made this episode about this, is the fact that how does that affect our kids? Like, how is my daughter affected by those years of drug addiction? Because half of her life, she's 16 now, but for half of her life, the first half, those like formative years, I was on drugs. I was a good parent. I felt like the best I could be, but like when you're on drugs, you're on drugs, and you can try your best, but drugs always, they're the most important, because you get to a point that you can't really function without them, and that's the truth. And like, drug addicts aren't bad people. They're people that had problems that didn't get nurtured, like when we were kids. And we live in a society that just like pushes us to fringes, dismantles the family unit. And then you have companies like Purdue Pharma that, like, they're predatory, these pharmaceutical companies, and they targeted at these families because they don't give a shit. Just at the expense of your kids, your husbands, your wives, your brothers, at the expense of fucking rations here. In this part of the country I live in, it's generational, and I'll get into the generational effects and why it's so layered up and so hard here to really change the tide of addiction. for the community and for individuals. And I'll get into that more in the second half as take a deep breath and kind of head down the road to recovery. And there is so much that I just like brushed the surface of my story and addiction in this episode and in this half. And that's why this episode I'm marking the launch and of a documentary film I'm going to work on. I've pulled it off the back burner. I started working on it months ago and planning it, and life became life, and it's what it is. And it got pushed to the back burner, but I'm going to pull it off the back burner because it's time. It's time, and I feel focused and energized about it. And it's a long time in the making. And the story, I'm not even sure what the story is going to be because I'm not sure what I'm going to uncover. But I know it's grassroots and it's real people, and there is no system. There is no medical. None of those people are going to be involved. I just want real people and real stories of where it was and where it's at now. Because where it's at now is not what they may lead you to believe that it is here, or in a lot of places now after that epidemic, because it isn't. And what's happened here is not tons of rehabilitation and a concerted effort from the community to rebuild after this huge epidemic that was just a scourge and just demolished and devastated this area. No, now it's Suboxone pill mills and methamphetamine is very much the story here, 25 years after the introduction of OxyContin. And not a lot has changed, but it's changed, you know. And I just briefly mentioned my story with that, and like I said, in 2016 that ended. But while I never touched opiates and methamphetamine or anything like that again, I had healed a lot of stuff, and I thought that I had dealt with a lot of stuff, and I was clean and I was sober and I was happy with life and everything was going in a great direction. I was at the beach and I got a great job. And this is the sneakiness of the ego and addiction. I allowed myself and I convinced myself that I could drink a little bit because I was fine, because drinking was never my thing. It was pain pills, it was narcotics. And that turned into a huge drinking problem for me that the culmination of I shared in the last episode. And it was August 8th, 2 years ago. And I had a seizure while I was driving, and it was followed by a week that I have very few recollections of, and I'm not going to recount them all right now, because if you really want to know how that story ended, last week's episode was really good, and I start the episode with that story. So please go back and check that out if you want to know how that ended. I intend to do more talks about addiction and my story, because I could go on, and maybe I should have taken notes, but I don't do notes. I'm very off the cuff and I ran, so sometimes I forget things and I go back and I rewatch and I take notes so that I can make sure to follow up. So on that note, I hope you enjoyed that first half. It was a little disconnected, and I thought I was going to be able to share more in 30 minutes than I was able to, but I was not. And I probably should not have wasted that much time on the Purdue Pharma emails, because really, who gives a fuck? We already know that they're pieces of shit, that whole system. But I'm not going to get into that right now, because that's enough for a whole nother episode and the medical industrial complex. So on that note, guys, I'm going to take a brief intermission. I'm going to get my cup of coffee warmed up real quick, and I'll be back for the second half as we go on to the road to recovery. I'll be right back. Hey, welcome back, everybody, to the second half of Above the Noise. I am Casey Messick, your host. I hope you took the opportunity during that brief intermission to grab yourself some coffee, maybe some cannabis, get your smoke on a little bit, if you will. So, before I get started in the second half of this episode on the road to recovery, I want to take the opportunity to suggest to you what I am hoping to accomplish with this show and what I'm hoping to encourage everybody else to do with their own platforms. So I would like you to imagine these social media platforms that we're on as digital cityscapes. And so everybody's got their pages, everybody's got their profiles, and that is essentially your block. That is your block of the digital cityscape. And so on Casey's block, I've got Above the Noise. I've got my soapbox, and I get up on it and I philosophize and I socialize and I humanize and I cannabinize and I try and raise the conversation above the noise so that we can kind of try and get to that subconscious programming that has us all fucked up, that has us not living authentically and not connecting on a real level with each other because we're so distracted down here with the noise. And so I want to encourage everybody to pursue their passions. I'm passionate about talking. I'm passionate about sharing my experiences. And so I got up on my soapbox and I want to encourage you guys to do your thing on your block. If you're a painter, go do a live stream, start a live stream, paint a picture, some music in the background, and just talk to us, or don't talk to us. Just share us, share your passions with us. And then I want you to open up your case or throw your hat on the ground and just leave yourself out there to do your thing for the people scrolling the digital cityscape. And they're going to wander up on your shit. And hopefully they'll like it. And they'll hang for a minute and they'll watch you paint your picture. Or they'll like what Casey's vibing on. And they'll sit there and chill and they'll listen for a minute and they'll be like, you know what? I like what this cat's doing. I'm gonna throw a tip in his hat. So metaphorically speaking, in the digital world, I have my digital hat on the ground. It's Cash App and it's PayPal. It's our digital hats. It's our digital cases for our blocks in this digital cityscape that we're existing in. And so just like me, I'm encouraging you, like, chase your dreams, share your passions, help us all connect above the noise. Create content to share with us. Tell us who you are. Leave the noise down here. Share the beauty up here. Never mind chasing views, chasing millions of views to get ads that for me personally, I don't really want popping up in the middle of a live stream or a replay for products that I'm not really supporting anyway because I'm trying to be above the noise. And I don't want to try and encourage you to go support me or support this show and this effort or to support other people. I mean, but listen, other people have Patreon going on and they have those platforms. By all means, support them. I'm not saying please don't take it that way. But if you're trying to create content, you're just getting started and you're a painter, say you're a photographer, and you're trying to promote yourself because you love photography, take us on some of the photo shoots with you. Just get some video of it, share it with us, share your portfolio with us, create a video of a slideshow and just share it with us, run your Cash App and your PayPal and let us support you. Let's support each other. You know what I mean? So that we can feel like we can accomplish our passions. We can feel like we can get up here and we can share our hopes and dreams. We can share what we're scared of. We can be authentic, real people and feel like we might move forward with it. Like somebody might like this and I don't have to chase a million views. All I have to do is put my digital hat on the ground. Guys, think about all the money that we spend on just shit. How much did you spend on a Starbucks coffee today? How much did you just spend on shit? We could be spending that money that we waste on useless crap supporting each other. But only if we create a space to share our shit so that people can support us. Like, we have to do that. Like, we talk about supporting each other all the time. It's always encouraged and everybody wants to, but nobody's really sharing what they're doing. So again, like, if you're passionate about painting, photography, if you're just like this crazy nerdy person and you've got the whiteboard in your room and you're trying to work out all these equations because you're trying to take over the world or whatever the fuck your deal is, I don't know. Live stream that shit, run your Cash App and your PayPal and just talk to us. Like, I might vibe on it. I might not know what the fuck you're talking about, but I love people's passion. I might get into just like you share you're passionate about these equations. And so I can dig on that. You run your Cash App and your PayPal. I'm going to drop $1. I'm going to buy you a cup of coffee, however you want to look at it. I'm going to support that passion of yours. And that allows some real return for people that are trying to do something, because again, the notion of chasing views for ads that just pop up or subscriptions to other platforms. I don't do good with multiple platforms. This is streaming to Facebook and YouTube, and that's probably it, because that works for me, and I can do that, and that covers. We can all do that. The camera on your phone is better than the camera that Hollywood was using 20 years ago, and we live in a time in human existence that technology is scary, but it's also so incredibly empowering to allow us to chase our dreams and our passions, and encouraging all of you to do it. And I've talked about this longer than I intended to. So again, if you're enjoying the show, if you've enjoyed what I'm up here doing on my soapbox, please, throw a tip in the hat. Thank you very much. I appreciate you. And again, do it yourself. This is not just about me. This is about all of us rising above the noise. So on that note, thank you for that time, for the shameless plug and encouragement to you. So let's get back to the second half of the show, the daunting detours of addiction and the road to recovery. So in the first half, I went on a little long-winded and not very cohesively. It was a little disjointed about my struggles with addiction and my introduction to OxyContin and the OxyContin epidemic in this region of the country where I live. Southwest Virginia, so Lee County. If you didn't catch the first half, quick recap. Lee County, Virginia is the largest land-wise, second poorest county in the state of Virginia currently. At the time the OxyContin epidemic broke out and was just ravaging the area, it was the poorest county in the state, and it played out in a lot of ways. And so when all that happened, a lot of money came into the area via Purdue Pharma, and this was probably mid 2000s. I'm kind of guessing on my timeline a little bit. So like mid 2000s. And so it was mainstream media, the OxyContin epidemic, like it was mainstream news. It was in every small town. Everybody was affected, every place. And there's a lot of stories that have been done about this region. And so what happened here was not much, to be honest. Like OxyContin and those kind of things, they stopped getting prescribed, which was a good thing, I guess, in the sense of it being abused and so readily available. But it became a very bad thing for people with chronic illnesses and severe pain that really, really needed those medications, because a lot of them quit getting prescribed as well. And the ones that did were very fearful, because now if anybody knew that you had this medication, you were, you could be robbed or killed. Like that's some real shit. Like that kind of shit happened here, robberies and murders and people up on the mountain with battery acids, like crazy shit during these decades of OxyContin. And so that happened. And then I can remember when they took all that stuff off the market. And then I can remember there was a point in time where they started prescribing everybody morphine and morphine patches that had been getting prescribed OxyContin, only none of the pharmacies had them. You know what I mean? And so for a while, what happened was mail order narcotics. Like they were getting delivered, they were getting ordered online and shipped. I can remember people sitting at the restaurant where I worked at, because there was a good view of the highway. It was right on an exit, and they would watch for the FedEx truck, and they would know. And then people's phones, it was crazy. And so that went on for a while. And then Suboxone was introduced to the area. And that was, Suboxone was an introduction to me for getting clean. It was a gateway to sobriety. And Suboxone is a great tool if you use it for the tool that it is. And I feel like it was intended to be a tool for short-term use, not something long-term like methadone, which I also had an experience with that I didn't get to share in that first half, because 30 minutes was not long enough to share that story. But I went through the methadone experience too, and it was fucking horrible. And I don't recommend it to anybody. They will up you and up you and up you, and you will be stuck on that shit way longer than you need to be. And so Suboxone came in to the area, and there was kind of like two programs started. One was a very strict program, and it required a lot of meetings and things like that. And then there was other programs that started opening up that didn't really require as much. Um, and then hence became the introduction to pill mills in the area. And fast forward to today, we're all familiar with pill mills. But it was crazy. So you had Suboxone pill mills operating that didn't really require anything more than a visit, your initial doctor's visit, um, and then your weekly visits. And it was crazy because a lot of people did, you're talking about people without jobs, and as I said, drugs is the underground economy here for most people, and as was Suboxone. And so I can remember a point in time while I was not in a Suboxone program, I was taking people to their Suboxone appointments. They would pay me in Suboxone, which I could then use myself typically or sell or whatever. But it was very much set up in the sense that doctors were prescribing more medication than was needed simply because they knew that these people couldn't keep coming if they didn't have the means to come, and so that they were selling part of their prescription in order to afford their own prescriptions, doctor visits, and trips, to the doctor. And so they would overprescribe, arguably way more than what was needed. Because listen, I did Suboxone myself, and I did a lot of drugs. You know what I mean? The whole gamut, guys. I've done the heroin, I've done the meth, I've done the Dilaudid, the stuff in my leg, all of it. And I did Suboxone, and it's a very, very potent medication. It does not require 4 tablets a day to maintain sobriety. It doesn't. 4 tablets a day, if you did them, that's what it is. And so that's exactly why it was prescribed the way it was, is so that it could keep that underground economy running. And so nothing ever really happened here. There was a treatment center that opened up. I worked one summer at it, actually, and ended up losing the job because I failed the drug screen for cannabis. But that's another story too. But even that local treatment center didn't have any local people in it. It was all people out of Kentucky, because at the time Kentucky had what they called the Unite program, and the state was basically paying for rehabs for people. And so all the residents of that, it was a residential treatment center, were all from Kentucky. There was nobody local. They're the only local people in that facility were the employees. And so again, a local facility, nothing to help the local community. And so what's happened here is meth has come in and replaced the street level drugs, but then things like Suboxone are very much on the street too. And Suboxone, even itself, here has reached the point where people are putting Suboxone in needles in their arms as well, and they're fucking themselves up. And there's nothing really here to help them. Like, guys, I don't even think there's still a functioning NA meeting here anymore. And when I can remember when this, at the peak of this OxyContin epidemic, and it was this whole notion here of send him to Jesus or send him to jail, And side note on the jail, it used to be just a county jail, and then at the height of this OxyContin epidemic, they built a regional jail to serve 3 counties. And from my understanding, and I'm pretty confident on this, before this company, it's a privately owned facility. Before this company would build this regional jail, the county boards had to guarantee a 90% occupancy rate before they would build it, which they did. And of course, this is the midst of an OxyContin epidemic, sending Jesus to jail. And so that was easily achievable, to put that at 90% occupancy rate. So it's become here very much this rotating door of court systems and fines of people going to jail for drug charges, or all the other non-violent offenses that go with it, be it shoplifting, possession, like there's a lot of stuff like that. But even at the height of that is when the first NA meeting really started here. There were several AA meetings, but that was the first NA meeting. And then that was kind of fit in with the Suboxone programs, but they weren't very strict. You know what I mean? And even their approach to it was operated in complete violation of NA and NA principles. If you're familiar, one of them is anonymity. And so the way these Suboxone programs here were operating was they had a paper that you needed to get signed to verify that you were at this NA meeting or this AA meeting. Well, anybody can fucking sign that shit, but when you sign a name, you're now violating that anonymity of that meeting because the chairperson has to say that they were there, that they were not only there, but they were the chair. And that's just really not cool. And I would go to those meetings a lot, and I stopped going because there was not really any free time. And honestly, for myself at the time when I was going, I found that I was talking game, but I was talking the talk, but I wasn't walking the walk. Like I knew all the things to say, and I was right. People would be nodding their head, like pat me on the back. But in the back of my head, I knew that when I left that joint, I was going down the road, and I was getting a pill, and I was going about my business. And I was only there kind of because I had to be, or I got drugged there. I didn't really want to be, but I knew how to play the game, but that wasn't serving me any good. And so now people here, they're not on Oxycontin, and the people that are kind of wrapped up in that drug sphere here, it's methamphetamine and it's Suboxone from these people that have been, and it's people that have been on Suboxone for years and years and years and decade plus, and that's not what that medication was designed for, guys. It was designed to help you with those initial withdrawal symptoms and cravings because those are very, very real things. And those initial months and year, that first year, really, honestly, guys, of clean time and sobriety is hard and it's crucial. And that's what Suboxone and that medication is there for, is to help you with those cravings while you get your life back on track and deal with the things that were fueling that addiction to begin with. Like that's what it's there for. But we for a long time we've had a medical community that approached addiction uh, that didn't really address those underlying issues. Like, and society has approached it as very much a choice. Like drug addicts, like we chose to live this life and become these horrible people, and we didn't. We chose a coping mechanism, and a society that even fuels that coping mechanism itself. And we illustrated Purdue Pharma, and they targeted, people like this, and what's happened here is there's no hope. There's really still there's individual hope, and the hope that I feel like is in this community here in this area exists in individuals and family units and core units of friends and things like that, like helping, supporting, and encouraging each other, because there aren't really a lot of meetings, and the the clinics and the medications and the systems that have been in place are not really there to address the real issues. They're there for customers. They're there to keep people on medication because that's where the money's at. And that's just the reality of the medical society and the medical industrial complex in this country. Is it's very much about money. It's very much privatized. And there's a lot of doctors and a lot of people in this area that over the last 25 years have made a lot of money. And a lot of people have died. A lot of people's lives have been ruined. And it's going to be really hard for them to get them back, because what happens to people here is you might go to jail. You might get sent to jail. You might get the drug charges. You might go to jail for 3, 4, 5, 6 years. Let's say you go for 2 years to jail. You know, what's happened here is you're probably stuck in the regional jail, because even though anything over a year, you're supposed to get shipped upstate to a large facility, most of the time what's actually happening here is they are not. The regional jail is keeping people housed here for over a year and then charging a larger rate to the state and people to house them. But even when they get out here, because it's so generational here, like they got nowhere to go. Like you get out of jail here and you go where? You go back home or to your friends or whatever it is, and chances are you're just kind of right back in it again. And like for Casey personally, like I had to leave the area. It took having a knife held to my throat that I didn't recall for years because I don't know, I had blocked it out. I only remembered the rage and intensity of that night until I had to sit back and acknowledge that no, the 7-year old, my daughter, was the only sober one present, and she remembers it better than anybody. And it was true. And as I accepted the truth, I could remember it and I could get the visual in my head. And it's been a long journey since then. It hasn't been easy, and if you've followed me for any length of time on social media, you've watched my journey through a lot of things. And you know, I talk about addiction a lot. Don't hate on addicts. Don't hate on those still struggling. And those of you that are still struggling, take a deep breath and like it, you can escape it. Like it does get better. I promise you. I promise you it gets better. But it requires being honest about what was fueling that. Like, what are you numbing? Like, you have to be honest about it and you have to share it. You have to get it out. You can't let it just exist in this secret place that you're numbing out because it's destroying your life and it's destroying the lives of our families. And for the families of the addicts, like, just be understanding. I was very fortunate myself. My mother is a substance abuse counselor. And so I was fortunate when I stepped into getting clean that I had a family that was very understanding, even though they should have wrote me off years before because I stole from them and just a lot of I did them really fucking wrong through my addiction. But they understood, and love is love, and that is the answer to addiction is love. And it's the answer to everything. And I know that sounds cliche, but it's because it's true. And it's true in a metaphorical sense. It's true in that romantic, poetic sense of just like love is the answer. But it's true in how our bodies work. And I said it a couple episodes back. And the brain chemicals that are released, you know, and the oxytocin and the serotonin and the dopamine and all those things that make us feel good. And for addicts, especially when they've been there any length of time, whether they're in the midst of that active addiction, if they're in the early days of trying to get clean, like their minds and their bodies have become depleted of those just like life nurturing and encouraging and beautiful brain chemicals that propel us forward and make us take chances and see beauty in the world around us and really pull ourselves above the noise. And so it's real hard to see that sometimes. And so, again, for the addicts, find the love. It's not in the pill. It's not in the needle. It's not in the bottle. It's not in the sex. It's not in the gambling. It's not in the shopping. It's right here and it's right here. And it's with the people around you. And if you have to get away from the people, the toxic environments, then get away from them. And if you're legit and you're real, the universe will find a way. God will find a way. Source energy will find a way. You know, everything will work itself out because it's just how it works, really. And they know that. The system knows how. That's why they keep us mired in the noise, and they don't want us above the noise. Because once you get above the noise, you start connecting things and the dots and connecting to other people. Addicts, take a deep breath. You can do this, but you have to want to. Like something, you can't do it for your kids. You can't do it for your parents, for your spouse, for your brothers, for your sisters, for your job. You can't do it for anybody but you. And it has to be because you know that it has stolen everything from you and you don't want this life anymore. Like you have to like rock bottom, broken, just and you have to not want to be there anymore, and you have to be willing to deal with life on life's terms, as cliche as that sounds. And you have to be willing to do one day at a time, and you have to be willing to reach out on the hard days, and you have to find a safe place and safe people, and the people that you can be honest with and vulnerable, because I don't care what your issues are that you're dealing with in life. Sharing them with other people and being vulnerable and encouraging other people to be vulnerable and finding our way back to that authenticity, that will heal the world, guys. That's how we heal addiction. That's how we pull people up out from drowning in it, because it becomes such a vicious cycle, like everything else addiction is. And it fuels itself. It's its own guilt and shame and running from and numbing from. And you come out of it 20 years later, and all those things that you were still running from, they're still there. And they're still going to be there. Only you just compounded them by 10 million times. Grab life by the balls. Give yourself a hug. And turn your life around. Just fucking do it. Do it for yourself. Because again, when we change ourselves, this is how we change the world, guys. I promise you. It is not in the politics. It is not in the voting. It is not on the fucking television. I promise you that. It's right here in places. It's right here on social media. Oddly enough. Social media and our social spheres, I shouldn't say it's right here on social media, but this is a very good place for it. To change the world is, we have to change ourselves. Just change yourself and let it ripple out, because it will. Because the more I heal myself and I deal with my issues and I address those things that kept my life toxic and kept it mired in drugs and kept me running and scared and afraid to do live streams like this, the more I heal those things, the more I heal my daughter, and the more I change the story of her life, which allows her to change the story of everybody that her, is affected by her life. Her boyfriend, I heal, changes the story of her life. She heals, but he's connected to her. So now it's gonna heal, starts healing all the connections around us. I heal this. It heals my connection with my mother. Maybe it heals the connection with my brother. And we just start healing connections when we start dealing with our shit. And it just ripples out, and those ripples turn into waves. And the waves, they start crashing into old mindsets and belief systems and institutions that are already crumbling. Do we want to finish bringing them down or not? Because the only way we really bring them down is to change our mindsets and our belief systems. Because until we do, we're not really going to change a fucking thing. We can keep voting and raising our voice about stuff from an inauthentic place because we still think that the change is outside of us, that it's stuff outside of us that is affecting our life so much. No, it's us. Focus on you. Addicts, love yourself. It's okay. Whatever happened. Shitty stuff's happened to all of us. You don't have to keep doing that. It is a new world, and society is viewing you differently. And we love you. I love you. It's okay to hurt. But that dope is making you somebody that you're not. And you know that it is. And then you don't want to be that person or know that you don't. It's part of the reason you keep doing the drugs, because you're fighting that inauthentic person that you've become, because the real you is inside knows this is not me. And once you get there, just keep being honest, and people are going to throw it in your face still. And you're going to be reminded of it, and it's going to be hard sometimes. Believe in you. You have to believe in yourself, because you have to earn back the belief and trust of others. You fucked it up, and you have to accept that as part of the consequences. And don't, when they doubt you, don't put it on them and then use their doubt to justify you using and just giving up, because that's a fucking excuse. They deserve to take time to trust you again. That's your fault. Families, remember that when you're reminding them of things, that it's hard, and those things, those kind of things, and when you push too hard, pushes addicts, gives them an excuse, because their mind and their ego and that addictive brain is, in those early days, especially, guys, family and the loved ones of the addict, they're looking for every fucking excuse they can to use in those. After that initial physical is over, it's all in the head after that. Don't let the addict manipulate you, and don't enable them, but always encourage them, and always be willing to listen, because they're going to sling you bullshit for a while. You have to allow them to feel safe, that you're not going to judge them, and that you're just going to listen and let them unroll it all, because they have packed so much and numbed so much out that they have to get it out. And it's going to be hard to hear, because some of it's liable to be about you, as the parents, as the siblings, as reasons, as things that they've learned. Not that it's your fault. Let me be very clear about that. As the family members, it's not your fault. But there are things over time that have contributed, I dare say, because this is a society and a community, and families are made up of individuals with dynamics, and things happen. And when I say things like I did at the top of the show, that the doorways to addiction and that gateway and the need for that coping mechanism generally comes due to abandonment and childhood sexual abuse, both of which predominantly occur at the hands of family. So, at an age and a time when we're learning about love and what love is and how we interact with people and coping mechanisms, and then something like that happens to you, and your ideas of love get very skewed. Well, as I said earlier, love and our concept of love, like, and just the thoughts of what we think of love is, like whatever context you put love in, and what you consider it to be, is releasing these brain chemicals. And so from a childhood standpoint, from childhood, we get really messed up in our heads, and then we spend the rest of our lives trying to find love that we don't really understand, because it got really fucked up. Love is what you're passionate about. Love is what makes you get up in the morning. Love is what makes you smile. Love is that person you see. Just find your way back to it. I've gone on long-winded. I apologize, guys. I hope you enjoyed the show tonight. I've gone on longer than I wanted to. I'm a little cannabinized, if you will. So just to recap, again, if you have enjoyed what I've been dropping on my soapbox here on my block of social media on the internet, please throw a tip in the digital hat, so to speak. PayPal, Cash App, throw $1, buy a cup of coffee. And again, if whatever you're passionate about, go do this stuff yourself. Anybody can do what I'm doing. I just like to talk. I like to talk about shit that's in my head. It's good for me personally, and it's very healthy for me to process things. And I deal with the same shit that a lot of people do, and I just like to share it and encourage people to rise above the noise, and like really like follow your passions, guys. Follow your passions. Paint a picture. Take pictures. Sing a song. Play the guitar. Like, share your dreams with us. Quit going on about the politics all the time. What matters far more, your passions. and your paintings and your songs and your pictures and your content and your videos and your talks and your vulnerability and your stories will change the world far more than whatever lever you pull in that voting booth, because it starts here and it ripples out. You guys, I love you. Make sure to tune in next week for episode 7 is the power of we and the essence of intentional communities. I'll be joined by Rebecca R.K. Some of you may know her from Facebook. She'll be sharing her insights on intentional communities and stories from her time in Nepal. So I'm super excited about that. Make sure to set a reminder or going. The event is under my event tab on Facebook. If you're not already following me on social media, check me out on Facebook and YouTube both. And make sure to tune in next week to Above the Noise. I love you guys. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I'll see you next week.